What does it mean to create well? That is where I want to begin, because ours is an age of creators. We create systems, we create networks, we create digital realities, we create synthetic voices, synthetic images, synthetic intelligence. We are no longer only making tools, we are shaping environments. We are constructing worlds inside which human beings will think, feel, choose, trust, and become. And in Garden of Wisdom, I argue that whenever a civilization gains this kind of creative power, it must return to one of the oldest and deepest questions in human memory. What kind of creation are we bringing forth? This is why Genesis matters, not because it is a science textbook, not because it competes with biology or cosmology, not because ancient language can replace modern research. Genesis matters because it teaches the ethics of creation. It reminds us that making is never morally neutral. Ordering reality is never merely technical. To create is not only to produce, it is to set conditions, to establish relationships, to define boundaries, to decide what kind of world others will inhabit. That is what makes Genesis so relevant to the age of artificial intelligence. Because in our time, creation is no longer only biological or architectural, it is computational, cultural, algorithmic, planetary. We are creating systems that shape perception, systems that influence attention, systems that direct economies, systems that affect childhood, politics, intimacy, work, art, education, and memory itself. And so the Genesis question returns with enormous force. When we create, what are we making creation for? In the opening movement of Genesis, the world is not described as random noise. It is described as being brought into order, light separated from darkness, waters distinguished, realms shaped, life emerging in pattern, sequence, and relation. Whatever one's theology, the moral image is powerful. Creation begins with discernment. Things are distinguished, named, placed in right relation. This matters because one of the great temptations of technological civilization is to confuse power with wisdom. We assume that if we can generate enough output, connect enough nodes, gather enough data, and scale fast enough, then something meaningful must be happening. But Genesis offers a different standard. Creation is not judged first by speed, it is judged by order, integrity, and goodness. That is a very different ethic. It means that not all making is worthy, not all production is creative in the deepest sense. Not all innovation deserves the name progress. Some things are built brilliantly and still deform life. Some things are highly efficient and still spiritually disordered. Some things expand human power while shrinking human depth. So the question is not only whether we are creating, we are, the question is whether what we create is rightly ordered. In Garden of Wisdom, I return to this idea often. The future is not simply about smarter systems, it is about wiser creation. That means intelligence must be guided by moral architecture. The ability to make must remain answerable to the purpose of life, because every act of creation carries a hidden philosophy. What is a human being? What is nature? What is freedom? What matters more? Efficiency or dignity? Speed or truth? Convenience or responsibility? Power or stewardship? Those questions are always there, even when we pretend they are not. A platform answers them. An economic model answers them. An AI system answers them. An educational system answers them. Even an interface answers them. Every created system teaches. It teaches what counts. what matters, what is rewarded, what is ignored, what is visible, what is disposable. And that is why the ethics of creation cannot be treated as a side conversation. It is the main conversation. Genesis also teaches something else. Modern cultures easily forget limits are not enemies of creation. They are part of its wisdom. This is very important. We often imagine limits as obstacles, something to overcome, something old, restrictive, irrational, anti-progress. But the Genesis imagination understands that differentiation and boundary are conditions of life. Without distinction, there is chaos. Without measure, there is confusion. Without rhythm, there is collapse. A forest has limits. A body has limits. An ecosystem has limits. A healthy society has limits. Even a meaningful life has limits. The refusal of all limit is not freedom. It is eventually destruction. And this matters in the AI age because one of the dominant instincts of modern technological culture is expansion without pause. More data, more scale, more extraction, more integration, more predictive power, more automation, more reach. But a civilization that loses the wisdom of limit eventually begins to create against life rather than for it. Genesis offers another vision: creation with order, power with distinction, abundance with form. That is not a call to fear the future, it is a call to create responsibly within it. Now, let us go deeper. One of the most profound features of Genesis is the recurring recognition that creation is not only made but evaluated. There is a rhythm, something is brought forth, and then it is seen. That pause matters. Creation is followed by reflection. This too is an ethic, because one of the great dangers of our age is the disappearance of moral pause. We build quickly, deploy quickly, scale quickly, distribute quickly, monetize quickly. We are often far better at launching systems than examining the worlds those systems create. But Genesis suggests that true creation includes judgment, not condemnation, discernment. Is this good? Does this belong? What kind of life does this sustain? What kind of life does it injure? What kind of relationship does it establish between beings, between humans, between humanity and the larger living world? These are Genesis questions, and they are desperately needed now, because we are building systems capable of affecting billions without always having a shared language for evaluating what they are doing to the human soul, to communities, to children, to institutions, to truth, to ecological life. The speed of innovation has outpaced the depth of reflection. Genesis slows us down just enough to ask, what have we brought into the world? And what is it doing now that it is here? In Garden of Wisdom, I argue that this is the moral threshold of the AI era. We are no longer only inventors, we are world makers. And world making requires reverence, not paralysis, not refusal, reverence. Reverence means understanding that life is not raw material for endless experimentation. It means recognizing that intelligence is powerful enough to want what it does not understand. It means admitting that creation has consequences beyond the creator's intention. That is why stewardship becomes so central. In the biblical imagination, the human being is not presented as a careless consumer dropped into a meaningless landscape. The human is entrusted with care, with naming, with cultivation, with participation in a larger order. This is crucial because in modern societies, we often speak as if freedom means absolute self-assertion, the right to build, use, scale, alter, and dominate. as long as it is profitable or technically feasible. But Genesis suggests a different model, the human as steward, not owner of reality, not God of reality, steward within reality. That is a very humbling idea, and it may be one of the most important ideas for the future, because the systems we are building now are not separate from life, they are entering life. They are shaping the field in which future generations will become themselves. They are influencing the terms of attention, memory, identity, labor, and belonging. So, stewardship means asking, does this technology cultivate human flourishing? Does it strengthen truth? Does it protect the vulnerable? Does it help communities remain human? Does it respect the more than human world on which all civilization depends? Or does it merely increase power for those already positioned to benefit? That is the ethical divide. Now, there is another Genesis lesson we should not miss. Creation unfolds in sequence. There is rhythm, there is pattern, there is timing. Not everything arrives at once. This too has something to teach us, because our age is deeply impatient. We want instant scale, immediate transformation, frictionless transition. We expect human institutions, biological systems, and moral cultures to absorb change at the speed of software, but life rarely grows that way. A child grows in stages. A forest grows in stages. Wisdom grows in stages. Civilization itself grows in stages. When technology outruns the developmental capacity of the people and institutions meant to live with it, the result is not necessarily progress, it may be destabilization. Genesis reminds us that wise creation respects sequence. That is such an important lesson now. We cannot simply ask, can this be built? We must also ask, can this be responsibly integrated? Can a family absorb it? Can a school absorb it? Can a democracy absorb it? Can the moral imagination of a civilization absorb it without being fractured by it? Sequence matters, pace matters, integration matters, and then there is perhaps the deepest insight of all. Genesis presents creation as meaningful before it becomes useful. Let that sit for a moment. Meaningful before useful. That reverses so much of modern logic. In a purely instrumental civilization, value is measured by utility. What can it do? How fast? For whom? At what profit? With what output? With what output? So, but Genesis offers a world in which reality is first encountered as good, not merely useful. This changes everything. It means a person has dignity before productivity. A forest has worth before market value. A child matters before performance. A creature belongs to life before it belongs to a system. And if that is true, then the ethical task of technology is not to convert everything into function. It is to serve a world already rich in meaning. That may be one of the most needed corrections in the AI era, because systems built only around utility will eventually reduce the world. They will flatten mystery, they will commodify attention, they will calculate value and still miss sacredness. But if creation is meaningful before useful, then technology must remain a servant, not a sovereign, a participant, not a replacement for moral reality. And this brings us to a serious tension. The more powerful our creative abilities become, the more tempting it is to believe we no longer need wisdom older than ourselves. We start to think that sophistication can replace humility, that scale can replace discernment, that intelligence can replace conscience. But Garden of Wisdom argues the opposite. The more power we gain, the more deeply we need moral memory. Not because old language solves every modern problem, but because ancient wisdom still asks the right questions. What is creation for? What is the good life? What should not be violated in the name of progress? What does power owe to the fragile? What kind of order keeps life alive? These are not pre-modern questions, they are permanent questions, and they become sharper every time human beings gain new creative force. So, let me ask you directly, if we create systems that can imitate thought but weaken truth, is that wise creation? If we build infrastructures that increase convenience but diminish freedom, is that wise creation? If we design tools that optimize performance while eroding attention, dignity, and care, is that wise creation? If we produce dazzling intelligence without a corresponding ethic of stewardship, have we really created well? I do not think so. Because to create well is not merely to expand capability, it is to serve life. That is the heart of the Genesis ethic. Creation should not deepen chaos under the appearance of order. It should not centralize power while calling itself innovation. It should not erode reverence while claiming progress. True creation participates in goodness. It clarifies, it cultivates, it protects, it invites flourishing. And that, I believe, is one of the deepest messages of Garden of Wisdom. We are entering an era in which humanity's creative powers will become extraordinary, perhaps unprecedented. But our greatness will not be measured by how much we can make. It will be measured by whether what we make remains aligned with life, truth, dignity, beauty, and the living whole to which we belong. So Genesis still matters because it reminds us that the first question of any creator is not how much power do I have? The first question is what kind of world will this power bring forth? And if we can recover that question, then perhaps the age of AI will not only become an age of invention, perhaps it can become an age of wiser creation. As above, so below. In Garden of Wisdom, I argue that Genesis still speaks to the future, because every act of creation becomes worthy only when power is guided by order, stewardship, reverence, and a deep responsibility to serve life.